Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at anime and, well, specifically, if it can make kids more aggressive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I actually found this really fascinating study. It's called The Perceived Impact of Anime on School Children's Aggressive Behavior.
Okay.
It's from way back in 2011.
Gotcha.
And get this, it was done in Malaysia.
Oh, wow. That's pretty interesting. I mean, most of the research we see on this kind of thing, uh, media violence, it's usually, Western focused.
Yeah.
So that's a really cool, different perspective to bring in.
Right, exactly. Like, we always think about anime as this big Japanese thing, but obviously it's global.
Huge, yeah,
So to see how it plays out in different cultures is, I think, really important.
definitely.
So this study, they looked at 135 sixth graders.
Okay.
And first off, what do you think draws kids to anime in the first place?
Oh man, where do I even start? I mean, I think for a lot of kids, it's got to be the action, the fights, the special powers, all that stuff is just, it's cool, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the thing is, it's not just about the flash and bang.
Right.
This study actually found that kids, they also really loved how interesting the stories were.
Mm.
They loved the humor. And get this, they even talked about how they felt like the characters and situations were realistic.
Realistic, even with all the crazy, like, supernatural stuff and, over the top action.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, right? But I think, maybe it's the way anime portrays emotions.
Yeah,
There's something about it that just clicks with kids on a personal level.
like they can really connect with it.
Yeah, even if the setting is totally bonkers.
Totally. Okay, so we've got the cool fights, the engaging stories, but, and this is the big question, right? We have to talk about the violence.
Yeah, that's where things get a little more complicated.
For sure, because then it's like, okay, so watching all this fighting actually influence their behavior?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And this is where something called social learning theory comes into play.
Okay.
It was developed by a psychologist named Albert Bandura, and basically it suggests that kids, they learn by watching others,
Makes sense.
especially if they see those behaviors being rewarded or if they look up to the person doing them.
Right.
So think about it. You've got your favorite anime character. They're pulling off these incredible moves, winning fights.
You're like the coolest person ever.
Exactly. And everyone's cheering them on. So to a kid watching that, it's almost like a how-to manual for how to be tough.
I can see that. So how does that actually play out in the study?
Well, they found that these sixth graders, they really perceived these anime characters as having amazing fighting skills.
Hmm.
Like that was a big takeaway for them.
Wow.
And what's even a bit more concerning is that a good chunk of them, a significant number, admitted to feeling like actually wanting to hit someone after watching a fight scene.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is a little unsettling.
Yeah.
So a lot of research on this stuff on aggression focuses specifically on boys, right?
Yeah, traditionally.
Was that the case in this study too? Or were girls getting caught up in this as well?
That's one of the most fascinating things about this study. They found that both boys and girls were really picking up on and internalizing that aggression they were seeing in anime.
Hmm.
So it really challenges that idea that, media violence is only a boy problem.
Right, it's not just boys will be boys thing. It's much more complicated.
Way more nuanced.
This isn't just theoretical stuff either. Like, this study had some really specific, concrete findings.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the standout numbers there?
Well, for one, over 60% of these kids, they said they identified really strongly with the main character in the anime they were watching.
Wow, okay.
So you can imagine, right?
Yeah, the influence.
Exactly. If you feel that connected to a character who's constantly fighting, it's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
And then there's the fact that I mentioned it earlier, but about 20% straight up said, yeah, I felt like hitting someone after watching that.
It's a pretty stark number. And we're not just talking about, some super obscure anime here, right? This was mainstream stuff.
Exactly. These were popular shows. Things like, Dragon Ball Z,
Yeah.
Naruto, stuff that was airing on like regular Malaysian TV.
So this wasn't just a small group of kids exposed to this.
Not at all.
It was widespread.
Widespread.
So knowing that so many kids were exposed and even like having these feelings, these aggressive urges, it really makes you wonder,
Yeah.
did they actually think that fighting like that was okay in real life?
Right. Like, did they buy into the anime world's kind of rules of engagement?
Yeah, or was there like this internal conflict going on?
That's a great question. And that's actually where we're going to pick up in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to get into the kids' moral compass.
Hmm.
Like, did they actually think this was how you're supposed to act in the real world? Or were they struggling with that?
Duh.
It really is fascinating, though. You've got these kids clearly, like, super into these stories, feeling those aggressive urges. But the study found that they weren't just mindlessly, like, copying what they saw.
Oh, so they weren't just little robots programmed by Dragon Ball Z.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were actually grappling with it.
Mm.
Some of them admitted to, like, feeling guilty or even sad after getting into fights.
Interesting.
Yeah. And a lot of them said they were uncomfortable with the more extreme violence that, you see in some anime.
So it sounds like they were kind of in this push and pull, right? Like they loved the excitement of the fights,
Yeah.
but they also understood that it's not exactly okay to just go around punching people.
Exactly. There was this real tension there. And this study really highlighted that, they were drawn to it,
Yeah.
but they also seemed to get that, that's not how you're supposed to act in real life.
Right. It wasn't just a simple monkey see, monkey do kind of thing.
No, not at all.
Okay, so they weren't turning into like little brawlers overnight.
Right.
But did those aggressive feelings they talked about, did those actually lead to more aggression in real life?
That is the big question.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really, really nuanced.
Okay.
Because while the study did find a connection between watching anime and having like more aggressive thoughts and feelings, it didn't necessarily mean that they were actually acting more aggressively in the real world.
Hold on, so they're having these urges to hit someone,
Yeah.
but they're not actually doing it. Like, what's stopping them?
Right. It's the million-dollar question. And it's possible that, maybe they were able to separate that fantasy world of anime from their own reality.
So they could still enjoy, those crazy battles and all the superpowers and stuff, but without actually thinking that's how real people should behave.
Exactly. It's like they understood that those gravity-defying kicks and energy blasts,
Yeah.
they're awesome to watch, but not something you try out at school.
Right, right.
And that actually brings us back to why this study being done in Malaysia is so interesting.
Oh, right. Yeah, because most of the research we have on this is from like the US and Europe, right?
Exactly. Western countries, mostly. So this gives us a totally different perspective.
So are you saying that maybe Malaysian culture, which often emphasizes things like respect and harmony,
Right.
that could be playing a role in how these kids are processing, the violence they're seeing?
It's definitely something to consider. Like, could there be certain cultural values or even just parenting styles
Yeah.
that are helping these kids kind of navigate that influence?
It's a really interesting question.
It really is, and one that deserves more research, for sure.
It's like this study has kind of just like cracked open a door to a whole new set of questions.
Oh, absolutely, and it's exciting.
Yeah.
But we can't forget what we do know. This study did find a link between anime and heightened aggression, at least in terms of thoughts and feelings. So what does that mean for parents, educators, anyone who works with kids? I mean, should we be like banning anime outright?
I mean, that seems a little extreme, doesn't it?
Right. It's not like we can just ignore the potential impact either.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't think censorship is the answer. But this study does highlight how important media literacy is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we need to be having these open conversations with kids about what they're watching,
Yeah.
helping them understand, fantasy versus reality.
So instead of shielding them from everything, we give them the tools to like think critically about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the key. We teach them, that violence has consequences. We help them find healthy ways to express their emotions.
Right.
And we encourage them to question what they see on the screen.
Because, let's be honest, anime is not all about fighting.
No way.
There's so much more to it than that.
You're absolutely right. And that's a really important point to emphasize as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive.
It feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah.
I mean, anime is such a huge category
Really is.
with like so many different types of shows. It's almost like saying like movies make kids aggressive.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't forget, we're talking about one specific study
right.
with a particular group of kids in a particular place watching, mainly action-heavy anime. So to really get the full picture,
Yeah.
we need to consider like the whole spectrum of what anime is.
So like, would the results be totally different if we looked at something like, a slice of life anime about high school kids?
Right.
Or like a Studio Ghibli film or something?
That's the question.
Right.
Does watching, a lighthearted romance have the same effect as watching something super dark and violent?
And what about the age of the viewers, too?
Yeah.
Like, do teenagers process these themes differently than little kids?
Huge factor.
And going back to your point about cultural context,
Hmm.
what if we like ran this exact same study in, I don't know, France or Argentina?
Somewhere with completely different values.
Would we see the same link between anime and aggression? Who knows?
It's really interesting to think about.
It is, and that's what's so cool about this kind of research.
Yeah.
It opens up a whole new world of questions.
Yeah, it feels like instead of getting an answer,
Yeah.
we've just ended up with more questions, but like in a good way, you know?
Right. Like it makes you think.
Yeah, it makes you think more deeply about this whole thing.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. It challenges our assumptions, you
Yeah.
know, it pushes us to be more critical,
Mm-hmm.
and it reminds us that there are no easy answers.
Especially with something as complex as anime.
Oh, for sure.
So to wrap things up, this Malaysian study found that link between watching certain types of anime
Mm-hmm.
and having more aggressive thoughts and feelings.
Right.
But the good news is it seems like they weren't necessarily acting on those feelings.
Yeah. And there's just so many factors that could be influencing that, you know?
From the fantastical nature of anime to cultural differences to just individual personalities.
It's complicated.
It is very complicated.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what we want to leave you with, that
Yeah.
sense of curiosity and, the invitation to keep digging deeper.
Yeah.
Think about what resonated with you about this study. What questions does it raise for you about anime, about media in general,
Yeah.
about how we understand the world around us?
Keep those questions swirling around, folks. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into anime and aggression.
It's been a fun one.
It really has, and we'll catch you next time.